"Step back," said the guard. The words cut through the air like a rifle crack. For a heartbeat, the plaza went still, 100 breaths held beneath a white October sun. The man beyond the rope, young, angry, tattooed forearms glistening with sweat, froze mid-stride. Cameras stopped clicking. Children stopped whispering. Even the wind hesitated. This was not a place for shouting. This was Arlington. And the tomb of the unknown soldier had just been violated. Before we go further, subscribe to this channel if you believe silence can be sacred, because what you're about to hear deserves to be remembered. The sentinel who spoke was SPC Ryan Hale, 24 years old, standing his post with a rifle that gleamed like judgment. He hadn't planned to speak. Tomb guards almost never do. Their duty is precision, not dialogue. But when Jacob Price crossed the rope, shouting about truth and lies buried beneath marble, Hale's composure cracked. "Step back." Each word landed like a hammer on stone. The protesters' sneakers scuffed the polished plaza. "You can't silence the truth," he barked, waving a folded paper. Hale's jaw flexed, his fingers tightening on the rifle's walnut grip. 10 paces behind him, SSG Elijah Brooks, the relief commander, was already moving. Each stride exact, measured to the inch, ceremonial perfection with a pulse beneath it. Crowd murmurs swelled and fell like a tide. The sun glared against white marble, making every crease of the sentinel's uniform blaze like drawn steel. The faint scent of cut grass mixed with the sharper tang of metal polish. Somewhere, a flag snapped in the wind. Brooks stopped 2 feet from the rope line. "Sir," he said evenly, "you're standing on sacred ground." No shout, no rage, just the quiet authority of a man who's rehearsed silence so long that speech itself becomes a weapon. The activist blinked. "Sacred?" he said. "They were just men." Brooks's voice sharpened. "They were our men." The crowd gasped. A mother pulled her child close. Cameras rose again, hungry. For those who serve at the tomb, breaking silence is unthinkable. Words disturb what's eternal. Yet now, everyone watched the impossible. A tomb guard speaking. Legendary moment. Brooks stood square-shouldered against the white horizon, his shadow slicing across the marble, the rifle gleaming in sunlight. The unknown soldier's tomb behind him, the protester before him. 2 worlds colliding, 1 heartbeat apart. Hale remained motionless at his post, but his pulse roared in his ears. He could feel every fiber of his uniform. The starched sleeve, the crisp edge of his collar, the sweat gathering under his glove. Every instinct screamed to hold the line. CPT Sarah Donnelly pushed through the gathering crowd, notebook in hand, her voice calm but urgent. "Everyone stay behind the rope, please," she called, scanning for security. Thomas Reed, a AEDO visiting Marine veteran, stood near the steps, fingers clutching a chain around his wrist. The old dog tag there caught the light. His lips moved silently, a prayer or maybe a curse. "Do you even know who's buried here?" Brooks asked the activist quietly. Jacob Price smirked. "No one does. That's the point, right?" Brooks took 1 slow step forward. Boots struck marble, sharp, deliberate. The activist's grin faltered. "You're right," Brooks said. "We don't know his name, or the others. But we know this. They gave everything, so you could stand there shouting." The words echoed against stone, rolling across the plaza like thunder. The crowd fell utterly silent. Even the birds seemed to stop. Hale's throat tightened. He had spent months memorizing the unspoken rules. 21 steps, 21 seconds, 21 beats of silent honor. Now, that silence had become something living, trembling in the air between defiance and devotion. Jacob Price swallowed, lowering his paper. "I didn't mean—" Brooks's eyes never left him. "Then step back," he said, voice firm, reverent. "Not for me, for them." The activist hesitated. His shoulders twitched. He looked around, at the crowd, the cameras, the endless rows of white headstones gleaming beyond the plaza. Thousands of silent witnesses. He stepped back. The rope swayed gently in the wind. For a moment, it seemed finished. Hale resumed his pacing, measured, sacred rhythm restored. The cadence of duty returned like heartbeat. But then, Jacob turned again. His voice rose, raw and defiant. "You think silence honors them? Silence hides them." And that's when Brooks broke the unbreakable. He faced the crowd. His voice carried through the autumn air, clear, heavy and human. "You want to know what silence costs?" he said. "Look around you." The sound echoed off marble, through the trees, over the graves. Every headstone seemed to answer back in silence. Even the protester couldn't meet his gaze. Then Brooks did something no one expected. He lowered his head just slightly, in respect, before turning to Hale. "Resume the walk," he ordered quietly. Hale nodded, stepping off, heel, toe, pivot. The ceremonial rhythm returned, but the atmosphere had changed. The crowd no longer murmured. They just watched, eyes wet, breath held. The tomb had absorbed the storm. But something had been broken, or perhaps revealed. As the last echo of boots faded, Donnelly whispered to Brooks, "Sir, Command's going to want an explanation." Brooks's expression didn't move. "They'll get one," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But not today." He glanced once more toward the activist, now quiet and pale. Today, the unknown got to speak. And with that, the silence of Arlington returned, heavier than before. The rain started just after the crowd dispersed. Cold drops spattered across the marble plaza, streaking the white stone with darker veins like tears in the surface of eternity. The cameras were gone, but the silence they'd left behind still pulsed in the air. Inside the guard quarters beneath the amphitheater, the scent of brass polish and damp wool lingered. Rifles stood in perfect rows, gleaming in dim fluorescent light. SSG Elijah Brooks sat at the inspection table, cap off, hands folded. Across from him, CPT Sarah Donnelly flipped open a leather-bound notebook, her pen poised like a gavel. Between them, silence. Heavy, procedural, dangerous. She spoke first. "Sergeant Brooks, Command wants your statement by 1600. Brooks nodded once. "Understood. You're aware of breaking silence during a watch is a Class 2 protocol violation." Her tone wasn't cold, just official, the kind of tone built to survive wars of paperwork. Brooks didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the small window. Outside, SPC Ryan Hale marched alone across the drenched plaza, ceremonial rifle slicing through mist like a blade. Each turn, each pause, perfect. Even soaked through, his posture didn't waver. "The footage is everywhere," Donnelly continued. "Your words. You want to know what silence costs? They're viral. 2 million views already." Brooks's jaw flexed. And the commanding officer wants to know if you plan to defend what you did, or regret it." He looked at her, steady, unblinking. "I don't regret honoring the dead." Donnelly sighed quietly, flipping a page. "Elijah, you've been on the line long enough to know intent doesn't outweigh optics." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Optics don't bury the fallen, ma'am." The hum of fluorescent lights filled the pause. Somewhere down the hall, a boot heel clicked. Hale returning from his shift. Donnelly closed her notebook. "A formal inquiry convenes tomorrow morning. Until then, you're relieved of watch." The words hit like a shot. Brooks's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "Understood," he said, though his voice carried a weight that sounded like defiance. She stood. "For what it's worth," she said quietly. "I think the world needed to hear it." When she left, Brooks stayed seated. His reflection in the window merged with Hale's distant silhouette outside, two soldiers divided by glass and silence. Outside, rain turned to mist. Hale finished his final turn, the rhythmic echo of boots replaced by dripping gutters. As he entered the quarters, he stopped short, Brooks still there, motionless. "Sir," Hale said softly. Brooks turned. His eyes were tired now, the precision of his bearing slightly frayed. "At ease, Specialist. You off watch?" "Yes, Sergeant." Hale hesitated. "They said you're suspended." Brooks gave a single nod. "Until further notice." Hale swallowed. "Permission to speak freely?" Brooks nodded again. "You shouldn't be. The one punished for doing what was right." Brooks tilted his head. "Right's not the issue. Order is." Hale frowned. "But he crossed the line. You defended the tomb." "I broke silence," Brooks said simply. "Doesn't matter why. The silence is the line." For a moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of a wall clock. Hale's eyes fell to the spotless floor, the line between duty and conscience drawn clearer than ever. Brooks stood, adjusting his cap with mechanical precision. "You've got the next rotation tomorrow. Make it perfect." "Yes, Sergeant." Brooks started toward the door, then paused. "You ever wonder," he said quietly, "why we guard a man we'll never know?" Hale blinked. "Sir?" Brooks looked back at him. "Because we're guarding what can't be replaced. The idea that some sacrifices don't need names." He left without another word. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray over Arlington. The plaza was closed to the public. Metal barricades glistened with dew. Donnelly stood near the perimeter with a small team of officials, clipboards in hand. Brooks approached, uniform immaculate despite the tension etched across his face. At the far end, 2 officers from command waited. 1 major, 1 lieutenant colonel, their expressions carved from stone. "Sergeant Brooks," the major said, "you broke the old guard's code of silence during watch. Explain." Brooks stood at attention, eyes forward. "Sir, I acted to prevent further desecration of the tomb." "By engaging a civilian?" "Yes, sir." "Verbally?" "Yes, sir." The major exchanged a look with the colonel. "Your conduct has drawn public attention, both support and criticism. The Army values discipline above all. You understand that, Sergeant?" Brooks's voice was steady. "Yes, sir, but I also value honor." The colonel's eyebrow lifted slightly. "You believe those are different?" "Sometimes," Brooks said. "Honor requires breaking silence." The room chilled. Donnelly scribbled the line down, heart thudding. The major closed his folder. "You're relieved of ceremonial duty pending review. You may return to quarters." Brooks saluted, crisp and exact. "Understood." As he turned to leave, Donnelly caught his arm gently. "Elijah, you just quoted something they'll remember longer than their verdict." He looked at her, a ghost of a smile. "That wasn't for them." Outside, Hale waited in the rain. He'd heard whispers of the hearing. "Sir," he said, straightening instinctively, "what happens now?" Brooks looked toward the tomb in the distance, the marble now gleaming under a watery sun. "Now," he said softly, "we see if silence still matters to those who never had to earn it." Behind them, Donnelly watched from the steps, her phone buzzing with a notification. Live, tomb guard breaks. Silence, hero or disgrace. The word stung. She silenced the phone and looked out toward the plaza, where a lone figure, Thomas Reed, the old Marine, stood in the rain, hat in hand, staring at the tomb. The man's lips moved, just barely. "Shepherds of ghosts," he murmured, and as thunder rolled in the distance, the wind carried a whisper through the rows of white headstones, a sound that could have been wind or something deeper. The storm came at sundown. Wind howled through the oaks of Arlington, turning the flags into snapping specters against the dark. Rain sheeted across the marble plaza, each drop striking with the hollow percussion of drum fire. Inside the tomb guard quarters, the lights flickered. The faint scent of polish and damp wool clung to the air. Rifles stood at attention on the rack, each one catching flashes of lightning like veins of fire. SPC Ryan Hale sat at his bunk, boots unlaced, uniform half-folded, staring at nothing. His watch schedule hung on the wall, but his mind was elsewhere. He could still hear Brooks's voice from the hearing. Sometimes honor requires breaking silence. The phrase echoed louder than thunder. A gust of wind rattled the window. Then, from the far end of the corridor, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Hale rose instinctively, heels clicking together before he even saw who it was. SSG Elijah Brooks appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming mug. His jacket was off, shirt sleeves rolled, dog tags faintly glinting beneath his collar. "Couldn't sleep?" Brooks asked. Hale shook his head. "No, Sergeant. Storm will do that." Brooks set the mug on the table. "Sit down." Hale obeyed, posture straight. Brooks leaned against the rack, arms folded. "You did well today. Your cadence was exact, even with the cameras gone." "Thank you, Sergeant." Hale hesitated. "Permission to ask something?" Brooks gave a short nod. "Why'd you really break silence?" The question hung between them, raw, dangerous. Brooks exhaled slowly. The storm outside cracked with white fire. "You ever lose someone you couldn't bury?" he asked. Hale blinked. "No, Sergeant." "I did." Brooks's voice was steady, but thinner now. "My brother, Matthew, Afghanistan. His convoy was hit outside Ghazni. They recovered a few Pieces, but not him. Lightning flashed again. For an instant, Hale saw something break in the older man's composure, a shadow behind the discipline. I joined the old guard after that, Brooks continued. Thought guarding the unknown was a way to honor the lost I couldn't bring home. But when that protester crossed the rope, he shook his head. It wasn't just the tomb he was disrespecting. It was every name that never made it onto a stone. Hale looked down. The storm drowned out his thoughts. That's what silence costs, specialist, Brooks said softly. All the voices we'll never hear again. For a moment, neither spoke. The quarters trembled with thunder. Then, a knock at the door. CPT Sarah Donnelly stepped in, rain dripping from her field jacket. Her face was pale from the cold. Sorry to interrupt, she said. We've got an issue. Brooks straightened. What kind of issue? Media vans, Donnelly said grimly. A dozen at least. They're setting up near the south gate. Looks like someone tipped them off that you're still on base. Brooks frowned. Thought command restricted access. They did. Donnelly held up her phone. A video was streaming. Jacob Price, the protester, speaking into a camera soaked by rain, with the tomb's white silhouette blurred behind him. The army silences its own men for speaking truth. Tomorrow morning, I'll be back at the tomb, and I won't be alone. The feed cut off. Donnelly's voice dropped. He's planning another stunt. Brooks's jaw locked. Then they'll tighten the cordon. She hesitated. That's not all. He's calling it Operation Unmask Silence. He says he'll cross the line again, with a film crew. Lightning flashed. The power flickered. Brooks stepped closer to the window, watching the storm thrash over the headstones. His reflection stared back at him, the face of a soldier caught between duty and conscience. Command will cancel public access, Donnelly said. No, Brooks replied. They'll do what they always do. They'll hide behind procedure and hope it blows over. Hale clenched his fists. Sir, if he crosses that line again, you'll stay your post, Brooks interrupted sharply. Your rifle's not a threat. It's a promise. You guard, you endure. That's your job. Hale hesitated. Even if he disrespects the tomb again? Brooks's eyes darkened. Especially then. The storm intensified, shaking the walls. Donnelly's phone buzzed again. A message from command. She read it, frowning. Brooks, they're moving the review up. 0600 hours tomorrow. Brooks didn't answer. He was still watching the lightning over the marble fields, the graves glowing like ghosts in each flash. Sergeant, Donnelly said carefully, whatever happens tomorrow, you've already made your point. He looked at her, voice quiet but unwavering. No, ma'am, not yet. Later that night, long after Donnelly left and the rain softened to a hiss, Hale lay awake listening to the rhythm of water on the roof. Somewhere in the dark, Brooks's footsteps moved, slow, deliberate, counting invisible cadences across the floor. The rhythm never stopped. 21 steps, pause, 21 back. Even off-duty, he was walking the line. Hale closed his eyes, hearing Brooks's words again. The silence is the line. Then, through the storm's fading growl, came a faint hum, something mechanical. Hale sat up, listening, the low drone of engines. He moved to the window. Beyond the iron fence in the distance near the road, headlights, several of them, vans. Their silhouettes shifted in the rain. Hale's stomach tightened. Sergeant, he whispered. Brooks was already standing behind him, eyes fixed on the same horizon. They're here, Brooks said quietly. And outside, through the sheets of rain, the faint flicker of a camera light blinked red. Dawn crept in gray. The storm had passed, but the air still trembled with its aftermath. Marble slick with rain, flags heavy with moisture, the smell of wet stone thick as breath. The plaza of the tomb of the unknown soldier shimmered under a clouded sunrise. And for the first time in years, there was noise before the ceremony. Engines, cables, chatter. A half-dozen media vans lined the walkway beyond the gates. Tripods sprouted like metal weeds. Reporters whispered rehearsed outrage into their microphones, while security cordons stretched across the perimeter. CPT Sarah Donnelly stood in front of the cordon, clipboard under her arm, her tone clipped and steady as she spoke into her radio. All non-accredited press will remain 50 yards from the tomb plaza. Any breach is grounds for removal. Copy that. The static crackled in response. She exhaled, gaze sweeping the horizon, and there he was. Jacob Price. Tattoos glistening with dew, a banner folded under one arm, his expression calm, but his eyes alight with self-righteous fire. The camera crews swarmed him as he approached the rope line. "This is it," he told them, "the place where silence became censorship." From the side walkway, SPC Ryan Hale stepped into view, full uniform, rifle gleaming, face unreadable. He took position, each step deliberate, the echo sharp against the marble. The cadence was flawless. 21 steps, halt, 21 seconds, turn. Boots struck stone like clockwork. The cameras quieted. Even the reporters seemed to feel the gravity of the rhythm, a sound older than their questions. SSG Elijah Brooks watched from the shaded arch beyond the plaza. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was still suspended. But he stood in the shadows anyway, arms folded, eyes locked on Hale. The young sentinel's every motion carried the weight of generations, shoulders squared, rifle precise. The storm had left puddles on the marble that reflected Hale's movements like a mirror. In that reflection, duty looked eternal. Legendary moment. A single drop of rain fell from the tomb roof and struck the reflection of Hale's boot as he turned, a ripple across the mirrored marble, like time itself, bowing to discipline. Donnelly noticed Brooks watching. "You shouldn't be here," she said under her breath, approaching. "I'm not here," he replied quietly. "He is." She followed his gaze to Hale, the lone guard between silence and chaos. "He's good," she murmured. "He's ready," Brooks said. "Let's hope that's enough." Jacob Price reached the rope. Security shifted uneasily, waiting for a command that hadn't come. The protester unfolded his banner, "Words are not treason," and lifted it high. The fabric rippled in the morning wind, droplets flying from its edges. "Turn off the cameras," Donnelly ordered the nearest crew. They ignored her. Brooks's jaw tightened in the shadows. Price stepped closer, his voice carried across the plaza. "How long will you guard silence, soldier?" he shouted at Hale. "How long will you march for ghosts?" Hale didn't flinch. He didn't speak. His eyes fixed straight ahead, hands steady on the rifle. "Don't you have anything to say?" Price called again, his tone louder, sharper. "Or did they train you to be deaf?" The camera shutters clattered like distant gunfire. Donnelly motioned to security. "Hold position. Do not escalate." Price took another step. The rope trembled. "Freedom dies where silence stands," he shouted, voice cracking with the echo. Still, Hale moved, not toward him, not away. Just the ritual. One turn, one pivot, 21 steps back. The crowd murmured. Even Price seemed unsure now. The sentinel's indifference, his calm defiance, was more powerful than any confrontation. Then, as Hale reached his turning point, the wind surged. Price's banner slipped from his grip and fluttered forward, across the rope line. The cloth brushed the marble edge of the tomb. Gasps erupted, cameras zoomed in. Hale stopped mid-step. The world froze. Behind the rope, security reached for earpieces. Donnelly's breath caught. Brooks's hand twitched at his side. Hale's training screamed, "Don't break formation," but reverence screamed louder. He turned, one deliberate pivot, the rifle snapping to attention with a metallic click. He faced the tomb, not the man. The tomb. Then he lowered his head just slightly in respect, and spoke. "Remove it," he said quietly. The words were simple, but the tone carried command, not anger, not fear, just truth. Jacob Price hesitated, eyes darting between the guard and the cameras. "Sir," Hale said, voice calm as marble, "you've disrespected every name that never had one. Pick it up." The rain began again, faint, misting, as if the sky itself bowed its head. Price's hand trembled. He bent slowly, lifting the banner back across the rope. The cloth dragged against the marble, soaking through. When he stood again, his eyes met Hale's, and whatever fire had been there before was gone. Hale resumed his march, heel, toe, turn. The cadence reclaimed the plaza. The silence was no longer fragile. It was sovereign. Brooks stepped out from the shadows then, slow, measured. The cameras turned toward him instantly. He ignored them, walking straight to Donnelly's side. "You're officially in violation of suspension," she murmured. "I know," he said, "but sometimes the uniform needs to remind people what it stands for." Reporters called out questions. Sergeant, Brooks, do you condone what he said? Was this planned? Is the Army silencing you? Brooks didn't answer. He simply placed his hand against the tomb railing, rain dripping from his fingers, and said quietly, not to them but to the air, "The unknowns never asked for defense, but they deserve it." The crowd fell still again. Then, somewhere near the gate, a shout broke through the silence, a new voice. "Sir, there's movement near the north fence." Donnelly's radio flared with static. Brooks turned sharply. Through the mist, several figures appeared. More protesters, cameras in hand, ducking past the line. Price looked horrified. "I didn't call them." Brooks didn't hear him. He was already moving, boots pounding marble. Hale halted his walk mid-stride, rifle snapping upright, eyes narrowing. The tomb plaza, sacred, silent, eternal, was about to be stormed. And for the first time in its history, two guards would stand shoulder to shoulder, not against time, but against the living. Rain returned with fury. Sheets of it slashed across the plaza, turning the marble slick and silver beneath the rising light. The flags whipped against their poles like thunderclaps of cloth. SSG Elijah Brooks moved fast, cutting across the open plaza toward the northern fence. His boots hammered the stone, each stride a violation of his own precision, every step raw with purpose. Behind him, SPC Ryan Hale broke formation. He shouldn't have. But the oath to guard outweighed the order to stand still. He sprinted, rifle held high, water flying from the polished barrel. Cameras swung wildly. Reporters shouted through the storm. Multiple civilians on the plaza. "Guards are moving! Guards are running!" CPT Sarah Donnelly tried to raise the command post on her radio. Static answered, "Security, respond! We have trespassers breaching the cordon." The protesters, 3 men, 1 woman, crossed the rope line. Wet banners slapped against the marble as they fumbled with their signs. One tripped, striking the corner of the tomb's marble base. The crack of impact echoed like a rifle shot. Brooks reached them first. "Stop!" His voice roared through the rain, not the calm command of ceremony, but the thunder of a soldier who'd seen too many names carved in stone. The intruders froze. Cameras zoomed in. One man shouted, "We're not here to hurt anything." Brooks stepped closer, every inch of him authority. "Then why bring chaos to where only silence belongs?" The protester lowered his sign. "We just want the world to hear." Brooks's hand cut through the air. "They can't hear through noise." Lightning split the sky. For a heartbeat, the tomb and its guardians were cast in white fire, living statues against eternity. Legendary moment. Brooks and Hale stood side by side, rain sheeting off their uniforms, rifles gleaming like twin pillars before the unknown. The barrows, marble behind them, glowed pale, ghost-like, the inscription visible even through the storm. "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." The protesters looked around, suddenly small in that glow. Even the cameras felt intrusive now, lenses trembling under the weight of reverence. "Step back," Brooks said, voice calm again. The tone carried not anger, but invitation. "Step back and remember who they died for." The rain softened, as if the world itself listened. Hale lowered his rifle slightly. His gaze met Brooks. No words, only shared understanding. The intruders began to retreat, slowly. One dropped his banner and didn't pick it up. Then a voice rose behind them. Jacob Price, soaked to the bone, sprinting across the plaza toward them. "Wait!" he shouted. "This wasn't supposed to—" He slipped on the marble, crashing to one knee. Hale moved without hesitation, crossing the space to steady him. "Don't move," Hale said quietly. "You're on sacred ground." Price looked up, rain mixing with tears on his face. I didn't mean for this." Brooks approached, towering over both men. "Meaning's easy," he said. "Respect isn't." Price met his gaze. "Why do you care so much about silence?" Brooks paused. "Because it's the only language the dead still understand." For a long, trembling moment, nobody spoke. The storm subsided to a drizzle, the sound of water trickling down marble like distant whispers. Donnelly approached slowly, radio crackling at her hip. "Security's on the way," she said softly. "They'll take it from here." Brooks nodded. "Let them." He turned to Hale. "Resume the walk." Hale hesitated. "Sergeant, the plaza. Resume it." Hale looked at the scattered banners, the puddles, the broken chaos of the morning, then at Brooks, standing firm despite suspension, despite risk. He lifted his rifle, turned toward the tomb, and began to march. 21 steps, pause, turn. The rhythm struck through rain and echo and camera flash, a metronome of meaning. Every step reclaimed the marble from noise. The onlookers fell silent again, shamed by the steadiness of a single man's duty. The sound of Hale's boots replaced every voice. Even the protesters watched in awe. One whispered, "He's still going." Brooks stood near the rope line, soaked and motionless, watching Hale's flawless cadence cut through the wreckage. Donnelly moved beside him. "They'll court-martial you for this," she said softly. "Maybe," Brooks replied. "But they'll remember what we stood for longer than any report." She looked at him. "You could have stayed quiet." "I did," he said, "until the silence needed defending." Thunder rolled one last time, distant now, retreating toward the horizon. Security escorted the protesters away. Jacob Price lingered at the edge of the plaza, watching Hale walk the line under gray sky. When the guards passed him, he saluted. Clumsy, but honest. Brooks saw it and gave a single nod, nothing more. Donnelly turned to him. "What now?" He glanced toward the tomb. "Now we clean the marble, reset the line, and carry on." She smiled faintly. "As if nothing happened?" "As if everything happened," he corrected. Later that afternoon, the sky cleared. Sunlight cut through the clouds, glinting off the marble until it shone like something holy. Brooks stood at attention beside Hale, both in full dress. Command officers watched from the steps but said nothing. The crowd beyond the rope was large again, larger than before, yet silent. Not a phone raised, not a whisper. Brooks turned to Hale. "You know why they call it the Tomb of the Unknowns?" Hale nodded. "Because no one knows their names." Brooks shook his head. "Because every one of us is guarding someone we'll never get to thank." He stepped back, letting Hale take the line. The young guard turned, rifle gleaming, posture unshakable. 21 steps, pause, turn. The silence held, powerful, eternal, unbroken. Brooks removed his cap, pressing it to his chest, and for the first time since the storm began, the sun touched the words carved in marble, clear and bright, known but to God. In that moment, every camera, every protester, every spectator understood. Silence wasn't weakness, it was tribute. Because some stories aren't told in words, they're told in the way a soldier stands. If you believe that honor endures, through storms, through voices, through silence itself, subscribe to this channel and remember those who guard the unknown so the rest of us never forget.